Hello, welcome back to Fallout 76. I was browsing the internet, as you do, and I ran across somebody who was advocating for us to all use the Bloatfly Syringer to generate more Bloatflies at events. His reasoning was that if you have more enemies, regardless of what they are, you're more likely to get legendary versions. And that means more legendaries for everybody, which is obviously a good thing. And you know what? I think he's right. So let's try and get some traction on this. Let's try and encourage people to use those Bloatfly Syringers during events. And that way we all get more legendaries. The Bloatfly Syringers are also very useful if you're trying to stabilize some flux. The reason is that you often find yourself short on materials to stabilize the flux. Harvesting plants for raw flux is very easy, but stabilizing it is a lot more difficult. Just because regardless of where you nuke, there's always going to be a bit of a shortage of enemies to harvest stabilizing materials from. And if you use a Bloatfly Syringer, that doubles how many enemies you get to harvest from, which in the long run should lead to twice as much materials as you normally would get. So from that perspective, it's also a good idea to try the Bloatfly Syringer, especially because the new legendary system requires you to craft star modules, and many of those require mutated serums. So harvesting and stabilizing flux is much more important than it's ever been. Now most people won't have a Syringer, so let's start with that. There's a guaranteed one if you go to the new River Gorge Bridge, go to the eastern side. Here I am, and just run down. There will be a couple of ghouls, and there's likely to be a couple of mosquitoes, but you should be able to defeat them fairly easily. This is a fairly low level area, right? So they shouldn't present too much of an issue. I did clear the place out before I came here, so yeah. That's why you didn't see any fighting, but go inside. And right at the back is a guaranteed Syringer. Unless someone else has picked it up, this should be here. The next step is to modify it to have the Bloatfly Lava Syringe Barrel. And like it says in the description, it can cause a Bloatfly to spawn when the target dies. It's very likely that the biggest issue will be getting the Bloatfly glands. Generally speaking, Bloatflies tend to be found in large numbers at events, particularly the ones that involve insects. So if you go to the one that happens at the giant teapot, or the one that happens at Camp Adams, both of them tend to spawn a lot of insects. So you get your fair share of Bloatflies. Another one that's guaranteed to spawn a lot of insects is Project Paradise, the one that happens at Arctos Pharma. So those three tend to be really good. But should you find yourself short or the events don't spawn, then there are a couple of places you can check out. One is the new River Gorge Resort. That tends to have a fair number of Bloatflies there. There's an unmarked location to the northeast of the map. So if you go to the Freddy Fear's House of Scares, and then travel northeastwards, you'll run across this cave that has a whole bunch of Bloatflies and a couple of honeybees. But yes, if you just go northeast-ish, you'll pretty much run into it. It may take a bit of searching, but it is on a hillside, and there's a bit of a swamp in front of it. But that one tends to have several Bloatflies and a couple of honeybees, like I said before. Then to the south, just south of Foundation, there's Spruce Knob Lake, and if you follow the shoreline just away from the docks, it's basically to the right as you're facing southwards. It should be around here-ish, and you'll run across this small camping ground that tends to have either Bloatflies or mosquitoes. That's another good source of Bloatfly glands. So generally speaking, the events that happen at these two locations tend to spawn a lot of insects, so they're the number one source for Bloatfly glands, as well as any other insect parts that you may need for, say, the scout quests, right? It's also a good idea to equip the Butcher's Bounty perk, as many levels as you can under Perception. That will increase the chance of getting extra parts as well as extra meat, right? You can always eat or sell the meat for caps. I finally got the 10 Bloatfly glands, so let's go ahead and convert our rifle to that. And the next step is to find yourself a nuke zone that you can go into and farm enemies. It's most likely that you'll find one at the Scorched Queen Beast event, or any other boss event. But before you actually go there, make sure that you have enough ammunition. because when you kill enemies, it will likely be with a different weapon than the Syringer. So unfortunately, you can't benefit from those context ammo drops. So make sure you've equipped Ammo Smith and Super Duper to maximize how much ammo you get. Then go to a Tinker's Workbench and craft yourself a bit of Syringer ammo. Luckily, they don't require too much in the way of rare materials or anything like that. Generally speaking, I think the limit will be with gunpowder. So I've just made myself about 70 or so. And once you're at the nuke zone, you can walk in and start farming enemies for those materials. But before we do that, let me show you a bit of a trick that you can make use of in order to avoid getting any rads in a nuke zone. It's a good idea to wear a hazmat suit or a stealth suit before you try this trick. Okay, so let's move forward towards the nuke zone. You want to be just at the edge. Slowly retreat. Sometimes it takes a bit of time for the rats to subside, so keep walking backwards until you get 0 rads. Then slowly walk forward until you pick up some rads. Then take a couple of steps back. Then go to your inventory and put the power armor inside the zone. Double check that you have the fusion core in there, or put one if you don't. Then get in. As you can see, no rads. For some reason, the game seems to think that if you get into power armor from outside the nuke zone, but the power armor is inside the nuke zone, it still thinks that you're outside for some reason, or at least it thinks that you're not subject to the rads from the nuke zone. So that's a bit of a trick that you can use with any kind of power armor. At this point, you probably want to hotkey your Syringer. That way you can actually shoot enemies and then kill them with another weapon, and you can do this quickly. Usually Forward Station Delta has some, although it looks like there's someone else in there. And Fisher Prime tends to spawn enemies as well. And yeah, so all of these locations. It used to be the case that you could simply use the Syringer to kill an enemy and spawn a Bloatfly, and then spawn a Bloatfly from that Bloatfly by shooting the Bloatfly. And that was a way to get infinite Bloatflies. But that seems to be being... Who are you? There's the guy over there. Okay, fine. Right, gotcha. Can we Bloatfly him? No, I guess not. There may still be enemies here. So you can only syringe an actual enemy. But that still means that you're fighting double the enemies, which means you get double the materials and possibly double the legendaries. So it is still well worth doing, right? Because one of the biggest limitations of nuke zones is that you often don't find enough enemies, which then puts a cap on how many fluxes you can actually harvest. This guy's fighting. Can I syringe some enemies? Stop moving. No, don't kill it. Don't kill it. Let me syringe it. No, he's killed them all. He's killed them all. Hello. Ah, you. Yeah? Okay, so we'll try with that. So we got that. Now let's go with a... Oh, that's gonna take a while. If you kill the enemies quickly enough, then you should get a Bloatfly spawning. Ah! Actually, let me try. Can I syringe the Bloatfly? Nope. So that's definitely not working. But as you can see, we got some extra hardened mass from that Bloatfly. So we also got some glowing mass as well. So as you can see, we get double the materials. So it's a bit of a shame that you can't Bloatfly the glowing Bloatfly, but we still got extra materials, so no complaint there. Okay, looks like these guys have regenerated, so let me also test something that I've been thinking about. Let's Bloatfly this guy. Okay, we definitely got him now. And let's go to the cremator. If I kill him with damage over time and then swap back to the Syringer, he will die. Guaranteed. He's already a walking dead enemy. And we got... Yes! Now, did I get syringes? No, we don't get syringes. So yes, you have to craft the ammo. So we don't get syringes as extra ammo, despite holding the syringer, right? So I was thinking that maybe we might be able to generate some ammunition by that, so we could then avoid having to craft it, but I guess not. So there you go, that's how you can get more enemies than you normally should in a nuke zone. But this trick can also be used during events. So if you go to somewhere like Radiation Rumble, you can syringe a few of the ghouls and that will spawn double enemies, which may actually lead to a lot more legendaries. I'm not sure if events actually have a higher chance of spawning legendary bloatflies, but it could be a very interesting test. As it happens, I got a Project Paradise event. So what I did during the event was go around and try to shoot as many enemies with the syringer as possible. And as you can see, that actually spawned quite a lot of bloatflies, and some of them were actually legendary. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, Project Paradise now gives you 5 modules, which is one of the highest rewards in terms of modules for public events. To give you an idea of just how much of a reward that is, the Scorch Queen Beast event gives you 2 modules as a reward. Now you should be doing those Queen events every time they pop up, not necessarily for the modules but for other reasons, like for example getting repair kits. But just the fact that it gives you 2 modules versus 5 for Project Paradise, that alone should tell you just how valuable 5 modules is. And if we look at the results afterwards, you can see that I got about 6 legendaries out of all that. I know that at least one of the bloatflies was legendary because I literally saw it with my own eyes. So at the very least, we got 1 extra legendary out of 6. I'm guessing that it was 2, but then again, I was kind of busy shooting enemies in the head, so I can't say for sure. But at the very least, we got 1 out of 6. Now imagine that this happens at Radiation Rumble. If we double the number of enemies, we should get roughly twice as many legendaries. And because everybody's so close together, that means that basically everybody gets twice as many legendaries. So yes, the person who was originally trying to get everybody to use Bloatfly syringes was right. I think it is definitely worthwhile to do that. And even if you decide not to, at the very least, you've discovered how to double the number of materials you get from a nuclear zone. So basically, there's very few downsides to using a Bloatfly syringer.